welcome to Starting Up. This week we come to you from 212, a bar and grill here in downtown Mumbai. On the show today, an exclusive chat with one of the Silicon Valley legends, Vinod Khosla, and of course our top 10 finalists on Super Angel series. That and a lot more coming your way over the next half hour. On the show today, an exclusive with entrepreneur and venture capitalist Vinod Khosla, his story so far, his take on the startup ecosystem in India, and advice for the future. We explore the trend of data security and the various startups that are ramping up in this space. And finally, on Bootstrap, we tell you how to make your web product search engine friendly. He's considered one of the world's finest venture capitalists. He's the founder of Sun Microsystems and without a doubt one of the legends of the Silicon Valley. Sudhir Syal caught up with Vinod Khosla at the NASSCOM Product Conclave in Bangalore for this exclusive chat. Listen in and don't forget to take your notes.
Vinod Khosla is one of the most iconic legends of Silicon Valley, best remembered as the co-founder of Sun Microsystems. Vinod has built upon his stellar career in venture capital, which today sees him ranked as one of the leading venture capitalists across the globe.
The best way to win any game is to make your own rules.
Today, he's the founder of Khosla Ventures, which has already raised over $2 billion in investments. Someone who truly believes in the maxim that it is not the big companies that can solve the world's problems, but nimble startups. We caught up with him on his recent trip to India and started the interview by asking him about his first ever entrepreneurial venture, a soya milk company.
Well, it was a failed venture because it never got off the ground. I was very interested in soy milk because I had to go get milk every day in those days. And there was an institute in Nainital that had developed this soy milk technology to make milk from soy beans. I remember vividly approaching people like the Small Scale Industries Corporation in Delhi, and I forget exactly what it was called. And then I remember when I called to see what it would take to get a telephone. And it was like 7 years wait list time to get a telephone. And I said, oh, I don't have patience for it. That's like half my life. Right. I decided then that it made sense to go to Silicon Valley and do something there and do a startup there.
But we know this burning desire to start a company and really make a big difference. It also came from you reading an article about how Intel was founded, right? So did that sort of trigger something off, or was it a chain of thoughts while you were here in Delhi pursuing your IIT degree?
Well, so, you know, this idea of starting a company I fell in love with a long time ago.
Sure.
And I remember reading about Intel starting up. And it was started by a number of people. One of them was a Hungarian immigrant called Andy Grove, who's still a friend of mine now. And the idea that an immigrant could go to Silicon Valley and get funded and start a company just sounded to me astounding given the Indian environment.
So Vinod, post-Daisy, you then joined Sun, or you were part of the founding team of Sun, and that's perhaps what you're still the most remembered for in some ways, right?
Yes.
Take us through that journey, and how did Sun Microsystems really take shape?
What Daisy Systems did was build CAD applications, CAE applications, computer-aided design. We spent most of our money, and we had raised some venture capital, developing the workstation, and then a little bit of money developing the application.
Sure.
And so it occurred to me that other people who wanted to develop applications wanted a platform too.
Right.
So the idea for Sun came from the idea that companies like Daisy didn't have a platform, a computing platform, a computer on which they could develop their applications, that they had to do everything, hardware and software.
You then came about quite a difficult phase in your career because you moved on from Sun hardly 2 years after you sort of started it, right?
So I was actually pretty lucky, and I moved from Sun to Kleiner Perkins, which had funded Sun.
Right.
So that worked out pretty well.
So how do you remember that transition and the reasons for moving?
I wasn't an easy person to get along with. I sort of didn't like the board's, you know, I sort of had a different view of innovation, and frankly, I was ready to do something else. And I had a different passion in my life that at that point I wanted to pursue that I haven't been able to do.
What is that passion?
I started doing furniture design, design has always been a passion of mine.
Like Steve Jobs?
Yeah, it's very much true, very much true. I think there's an elegance to clear thinking about design. But what I realized at Kleiner was, as I ran into entrepreneurs doing new things, I got sucked in to their ideas.
Right.
And I fell in love with the idea of a lot of different entrepreneurs doing different things and me being able to help them and work them, having started 2 companies myself.
Sure. Vinod, given how Sun has scaled and how it became one of the biggest success stories of the next decade, any regrets of leaving Sun and moving on to KPC?
None whatsoever. I'm not an operating kind guy. Sure. I don't like detail.
A lot of people don't know the investment side of you because in many ways you were linked to some of the biggest investment blowout success stories, right? Starting with NextGen in many ways, Siren's sale to Cisco. Looking back over the last 20 years, what were some of those highlight investments, ones you take home and sleep proudly with even today?
Well, you know, what's really important is when you do something that's really hard and really impactful.
Right.
So you mentioned NextGen as an example.
Right.
I'm really proud of it because all the odds were against us, and it was clear that Intel would sue anybody who tried to clone the Intel chip.
Sure.
But we were able to clone it.
Right.
We were able to not only clone it, but produce a much superior product.
And not get sued.
And not get sued. And not get sued because we created new IP, and we did a lot of things that would make Intel afraid to sue us. The ones that you're the proudest of are the ones that maybe others don't recognize. NextGen was really against all odds. And when we sold the company to AMD, which is a big public company at that time, we got like 28, 29% of AMD to a startup in return. We invested in Amazon.
Right.
We invested in Excite, which was very, very successful for a while. We invested in Google.
You must tell us the story about taking the Google folks to Excite, telling Excite to buy the company for $100,000.
You know, once an entrepreneur is successful, they get overconfident and they become narrow-minded.
Sure.
The great thing about entrepreneurs when they're starting out is they're very open-minded. Right. But if success happens, they get narrow-minded. Excite was quite successful, had become a public company, was competing with Yahoo and gaining share on Yahoo, and I introduced Larry and Sergey to Excite and had negotiated with Larry and Sergey that they would sell to Excite for a few $100,000. And Excite said they didn't want it. Right? That's later is why we at Kleiner Perkins got to invest in Google.
So Ram Sriram once famously said on this show that when he went into venture capital, he thought it would now be a mile wide and not so deep. But when he finally did get into venture capital, he found out it was both a mile wide and a mile deep. Is that how your experience has been as well?
You know, we spend, I like to say I'm not in the venture capital business. I don't like investing.
Sure.
I don't like finance very much.
Sure.
I don't enjoy it. In the last 100 investments I've made, we've never computed a rate of return.
Sure.
It's just sort of spreadsheets. I don't like those.
Right.
I like working with the fundamentals of business.
Sure.
What's the technology? What's hard? Who are the people? What experts do we need?
Right.
That kind of thing.
What are 3 things that attract you to business upfront?
Well, first, I love technology.
Sure.
Technology is my religion.
Sure.
Right? and the impact technology can have, like the internet has had or Google has had, you know, you think about it and it's very, very powerful. So I look at how large an impact can a startup have.
And it should have a massive impact.
Yeah. There's also this element of, are these people fun to work with?
Sure.
Are these people you'd enjoy? So it's not a finance transaction.
Sure.
It's sort of my lifestyle.
Right.
And it better be more fun to spend 3 hours on a Saturday with this team than to go to the beach.
Absolutely.
Right? And if it isn't, then I shouldn't be doing it.
Then you moved on to start your own fund and start Khosla Ventures, become an entrepreneur by starting your own fund again, right? What is that journey like and why clean technology?
I get bored pretty easily.
Sure.
So in 2000, I'd had a lot of success as a telecom investor. And I said, I want to do something new. And I felt like there was too much hype in telecom. So I actually gave an interview where the headline was, Khosla predicts optical bubble. I said, if I really believe this, I should be doing something different. And I spent some time looking. And I decided I'd either work on poverty or work on energy. And for a variety of reasons, energy was the more amenable to technology that I loved. And so I decided to work on energy. And I felt it was a new area. And there was almost nobody doing anything in energy. So that's how it started. And I picked one and just spent a couple of years being a good student and learning a lot.
What in your view are 4 or 5 of the biggest opportunities within the clean tech sector globally?
We did some solar and wind,
Right.
But replacing oil became a huge opportunity.
Sure.
And it's been a very, very successful area for us.
Right.
We've generated almost $1 billion in profit. Other broad areas, right? We looked at engines, and nobody was innovating in engines. Car engines and truck engines are a big source of energy consumption. Nobody was inventing a new architecture.
Right.
So we did that.
Right.
We looked at lighting, and nobody was fundamentally reinventing lighting.
Sure.
And so we are doing that.
Right.
We looked at air conditioning, and we said, we can reinvent air conditioning. Don't know whether it'll be successful, but we'll sure try.
Sure, sure.
And as I say, failure doesn't matter, but if you succeed, you can have a very large impact.
A lot of questions on when Vinod Khosla is going to invest more in India. What's your answer to that? When do you see yourself investing more in India, and what's your take on the opportunities here to invest in?
So, one, I don't invest in India. I don't invest in the US. I invest in global companies that operate everywhere.
Sure.
You know, when you're doing, we only invest in serious technology. It's funny, I look at a lot of technologies that come to me from India, and I say there's not enough risk in it.
Sure.
Which means it's not a big enough breakthrough, which means that too many other people can duplicate the technology.
Right.
So it's a funny way of saying I like more risk because it makes the problem harder for others to solve. If you build a great team that solves the problem, there isn't as much competition.
So you're not seeing great technology here at this point?
Well, so what I would say is it's been interesting on this visit to see much more of, especially in the internet and mobile space.
Sure.
We invest in all areas.
Sure.
We are about half our investments are in internet and mobile and IT, and other half are in clean tech.
Right.
We're seeing suddenly a lot of excitement around product companies and companies that might have global products.
Right.
So I see very encouraging sign now.
So what do you think the Indian startup product ecosystem really needs to sort of replicate, or at least begin to replicate what Silicon Valley is seeing?
I think startup ecosystems really take off when there's successful role models.
Sure.
So role models have to happen first.
Right.
A few really popular startups that made a lot of money, that did IPOs, that, you know, sort of the Google and Facebook of India.
Right.
That takes time.
Sure.
Right? And I see that happening, and I think it's very likely we'll see that in the next 2, 3, 5 years.
Sure.
Once that happens, two things happen. A lot more people want to do startups.
Sure.
There's a lot more senior managers that are willing to join startups and help because they see how they can make a lot more money. And the old startups really serve a good mentorship function for the young startups. So that's what it takes to get an ecosystem going.
One parting piece of advice from Vinod Khosla to the entrepreneurs watching this show?
My advice always is don't be afraid to try new things. I always tell people, if you're afraid to fail, you'll never succeed. John F. Kennedy said, only those who dare fail greatly will succeed greatly.
Vinod Khosla, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, there you go, advice from the legend himself. In fact, if you'd like to write into Vinod Khosla, you can log on to his website, that's khoslaventures.com. We'll take a breather here on the show, but coming up. It's the fast-moving trend of data backup and recovery startups in India. We explore the players in the space.